Hello and welcome back to Global Online Platform. This is Chandni Swarnakar and today we are going to cover Maharashtra State 2023 paper, okay? Previous year paper. So we are going to cover 30 questions today. So let's start without further ado. Now, you can get my lectures at 9 p.m. on a daily basis. Now let's start with the first question here. Wait a minute. Yes. Okay, so the first question is, this is not, let me tell you, the spelling is sedan women. This is E and this is I. The sedan women and the ideology of pornography is a feminist reappraisal of the work of Marcus D. Sed, named the author. The question is basically asking about the author, where the sedan women and the ideology of pornography, that is a feminist reappraisal of the work of Marcus D. Sade, and you need to answer the writer of the particular work, okay? Now, particular work, this work. So, the options are Kate Millett, Catherine Belsay, Angela Carter, and Judith Butler, okay? So, these are the options. You need to find out the correct one here, okay? So, let me tell you something about the sedan women and the ideology of pornography. This is the whole title of the particular book, okay? This is a non-fiction book, and in which year it was published? In 1978. The publishing year is 1978, and the correct answer is, the author is Angela Carter, okay? So you will tick the third one when you are going to answer this kind of questions. Now moving on to the question number 2. A.S. Byatt's possession, Calling a Romance. This is the whole title. Do remember this. Returns to thee. Okay. So, returns to the what? Now, options are Old English period, B, that is Victorian period, C, Middle English period, or D, Restoration period. So, here you need to answer the correct one. So, without wasting our time, let me tell you the correct one. Victorian period is the correct answer to this particular question. And before we'll move on to the next question, let me tell you, if somebody or the examiner is asking about A.S. Byatt's possession, Calling a Romance, you need to understand some of the basic facts about A.S. Byatt's possession, okay? So, you should be writing the publishing year, the character, the basic plot line, okay? So that you can answer questions on this particular work. Moving on to the question number 3. There are two kinds of morphemes. There are two kinds of morpheme, and now you have to tell me basically to the examiner that which are they, okay? First one, closed morpheme or open morpheme. We do not have such kind of word here. Second, bound morpheme or free morpheme. So, of course, bound morpheme is there and free morpheme is there. There are two kinds of morphemes. First, bound morpheme and free morpheme. Let me clarify this. Bound morpheme basically stands for those morphemes that cannot stand alone, okay, with meaning. Like if we divide this two, okay, so open. Let me do it. So, does this word has any meaning? No, okay, so that can be said as bound morpheme. Now, free morpheme, even you can divide a particular word. For example, management, okay, so manage will be a particular word that has a meaning, right, plus meant. So, that is free morpheme, okay, which has a meaning, a specific meaning, and can stand alone. That comes under free morpheme, okay. Let's see the other options. Bound morpheme or closed morpheme. I have already told you that there is no word such as closed morpheme. There is free morpheme or open morpheme. So, you have to answer the bound morpheme and free morpheme. The second one is the correct answer, okay. Moving on to question number 4. Which of the following was not written by Simone de Beauvoir? Now, for that, like for such kind of question, you need to remember the works of Simone de Beauvoir, right? So, the first work, of course, The Second Sex, has been written by her, by the writer Simone de Beauvoir. But here you can see the other options. For example, The Ethics of Ambiguity, or Edix Colin, A Farewell to Sartre, or The Female Inanche. So, here, let me tell you some of the works of Simone de Beauvoir. The first one, of course, written by Second Sex, Simone de Beauvoir. The Female Inanche Basically, it was written by German Greer. German, by whom? By German Greer. Okay, so this is not going to be the correct one, of course. So, Ethics, calling a farewell to Sartre, that is of course written by Simone de Beauvoir. The Ethics of Ambiguity, written by Simone de Beauvoir. And also, there is another work, The Women Destroyed. The Women, there are a lot of works that actually the writer wrote, but you need to understand that you need to memorize all the works, okay? The Women Destroyed. Now the correct answer, of course, the question is asking which of the following was not written by Simone de Beauvoir. So you need to answer the fourth one, the female Nanch, okay? Moving on to question number 5. Love your enemy, bless your haters, said the greatest of the great. Like further you can see other line, of course there is one line more, but here you need to answer that who said the verb statement. So the options are, by the way, if you can read or if you can understand this particular line, this is a very powerful line. Love your enemy, bless your haters. So the options are Alfred Tennyson, Matthew Arnold, Robert Browning, or Charles Dickens. So let me tell you the correct one. Alfred Lord Tennyson is the correct answer. He said this. Okay, this statement has been given by Alfred Lord Tennyson. Now moving on to question number 6. Charles Dickens' David Copperfield was first published in. So here you can see 1932, 1933, 1934, 1935. But of course David Copperfield was published in 80s. Okay. And you need to understand that these options are not correct. So let me tell you the year. It was first published in 1850. You can also Google that. Moving on to question number 7. Richard Hogarth established. Richard Hogarth. When I was covering cultural studies, or even when I was covering literary theory, I gave hints of these things. Wait a minute. That Richard Hogarth, Stuart Hall, okay, these are the critics or theorists is associated with some kind of studies, okay, so that you need to understand here. Now the first option, School of Drama. Second, Practical Criticism Center. Third, Birmingham Center for Contemporary Studies. Or the fourth one, Romantic School of Poetry. So here you need to understand that Richard Hogarth was associated with Birmingham Center for Contemporary Studies. Sometimes they, in net, of course, they'll tell you, they'll ask you about the full form of BCCS, okay? They'll ask you about the full form. So do remember the full form, Birmingham Center for Contemporary Studies. Okay, moving on to question number 8. In the Golden Notebook, Doris Lessing, you need to answer. You need to see the options. Okay, so the first option, examines sexual and women's liberation movements, whether it consider that, or B, provides an analysis of communism, or C, contains powerful anti-war messages, or D, explores the trauma of a middle class women. Okay, so if you have read it, you must know that it actually examines sexual and women's liberation movements. Okay, if you read about the Golden Notebook, that is of course written by Doris Lessing, you will find that actually examines sexual and women's liberation movements. So that will be our correct option, option A. Moving on to question number 9. It's when I'm weary of consideration and life is too much like a pathless wood. I would like to get away from earth a while and then come back to it and begin over. Okay, it's when I'm weary of consideration and life is too much like a pathless wood. I would like to get away from earth a while and then come back to it and begin over. So have you ever thought that I really want to begin my life or again begin my life? I so many times think, never mind. The options are, whose lines are this? Walt Whitman, Edgar Allan Poe, Robert Frost, or Emily Dickinson. These are the lines from a work, okay, Birches. There is a poem, Birches, and Birches is a poem by Robert Frost. So, of course, Robert Frost is going to be our correct answer. The third one. Moving on to question number 10. In Night of the Scorpion, Ezekiel represents the superstitious attitude of. Superstitious attitude of. So it was related to. It was related to, of course, Indian women. Okay, but actually it was superstitious attitude of Indian peasants, or you can say what? Sorry. Okay, so superstitious attitude of, okay, related to whom? So Indian women, of course, because in the Night of the Scorpion, there was a lady who was actually suffering, and you'll get to know that people around her was very superstitious towards her. Okay, so we can see, or we can come to a conclusion that Indian woman will be our correct answer. But even though you can check it out if you want to, but I am really sure of this particular option. Now moving on to question number 11. Who authored the Twice Born fiction? The Twice Born fiction, and colon, basically it's not the full title. Themes and techniques of the Indian novel in English. This is the full title, okay? And who authored it? So whether it's Shyamalan, A. Narayan, or P. Lal, or Meenakshi Mukherjee, or Mahadevi Verma. So basically it's a work by Meenakshi Mukherjee. So third one is the correct answer. Moving on to question number 12, not 14. Communicative language teaching is. Communicative language, why we use communication? We use, if you are using in the classroom, we use for learners. It will be learner centered, right? So learner will be students, of course. So here the options are teacher focused, not of course. B, material focused, no. Experience focused, no. D, student focused. It will be student focused because we focus on the learner. Okay? So sorry, learner will be the students, of course. So fourth one is the correct option. Moving on to question number 13. Who translated Derrida's Of Grammatology in English? So by this you need to understand here that Of Grammatology was written by Jacques Derrida. Now you need to know the translator of this particular work. Now the options are Homi Bhabha, Gayatri Chakravarti Spivak, Ferdinand de Saussure, or Jacques Lacan. Okay, so let me tell you, this translation was being done in 1967 and by Gayatri Chakravarti Spivak. Okay, so the second one is the correct answer. Moving on to question number 14. Who coined the term gynocriticism? I have already discussed this particular term in my previous lecture. So the options are Mary Shelley, Virginia Woolf, Ellen Showalter, or Kate Millett. And you also need to understand gynocriticism. What is gynocriticism? Do understand that. And it was basically coined by Ellen Showalter, and in which year? In 1979. So sometimes they can also ask you on this particular fact that in which year Ellen Showalter has coined this gynocriticism term. Okay, so you can answer that 1979, and Ellen Showalter was the one who coined the term. So moving on to the question number 15. The famous term culture industry was coined by. So culture industry is very much related to cultural studies. So I have already discussed that, and I think if you have read it, so you need to know the basics of it. Okay, so the options are Theodore Adorno, B. George Lukács, C. Stuart Hall, or Ronald Barthes. So sometimes you can get confused with Stuart Hall, but here you need to understand that Theodore Adorno and Max Horkheimer co-authored a book, Dialectic of Enlightenment. What? Dialectic of Enlightenment. In which year? In which year? 1947. In this particular work, they actually coined the term. Okay, culture industry. So the first one, of course, we cannot see Max Horkheimer here in any options. So you can see that the first one is the correct one. Moving on to question number 16. What is the pen name of Charles Lamb? This is very easy. So many times Charles Lamb has been used this particular nickname, Emilia or Eric Blair or Alia or Alpha of the Plague. Of course, Alia. I don't think you need to think about it. As a literature student, you need to know the basics of it. Now 17, question number 17. Who first used the term metaphysical for Don and his followers? This is also a very easy question, but still. Whether it's Ben Jonson, Dr. Samuel Johnson or George Chapman and Coley. So sometimes I used to get confused here, Johnson or Johnson. The spelling is different, okay? So here Dr. Samuel Johnson was the first person to use the term metaphysical for John Donne and of course his followers, okay? So the second one is the correct option. Moving on to question number 18. Blank verse consists of. So wait a minute. Yeah. The options are iambic pentameter, which are unrhymed. Okay. It actually follows iambic pentameter. You need to be very specific, or you need to remember the exact, okay, whether it's iambic pentameter or iambic hexameter. So let me tell you, it's iambic pentameter. So we can exclude these options. Now you need to understand whether it was unrhymed or rhymed. So it was unrhymed. It was in iambic pentameter, but which are unrhymed. Okay, so the first one is the correct one. Okay, but it has metered lines. Okay, unrhymed but metered lines. Okay, so the first one is the correct one. Moving on to question number 19. Who has remarked that his endeavor is to enliven morality with wit and to temper wit with morality? Who has remarked that his endeavor is to enliven morality with wit and to temper wit with morality? So the options are Richard Steele, Joseph Addison, Samuel Johnson, Daniel Defoe. With this kind of question, you need to remember some of the basic quotations, okay? So related to which writer or who said what. So that kind of quotation you need to memorize. You cannot do anything about it. You just need to memorize that. So the correct answer is Joseph Addison, because Joseph Addison remarked that. Moving on to question number 20. The Harmony of the Church, so it sounds like Harry Potter, is authored by William Shakespeare, Sir Philip Sidney, Michael Drayton or John Milton. So William Shakespeare has never wrote this particular work, of course, okay? Okay, so because William Shakespeare we have covered, so we know he has not written this particular work. Sir Philip Sidney, of course, no. John Milton, no. The only writer we have is Michael Drayton. Okay, so Michael Drayton is the writer or is the author that wrote the Harmony of the Church. Okay, moving on to question number 21. A unit of 3 lines of words that rhyme together is called. So now with this kind of question, they can get you confused, okay? They can make you confused. So you have to be very particular with it. Now, whether it's duet or tercet or triplet or tricet. Answer. Think about it. A unit of 3 lines of words that rhyme together is called tercet. What? Tercet. Moving on. Question number 22. Contrapuntal reading, a reading strategy that brings out the contradictions built into the text, was developed by. So first you need to understand what is contrapuntal reading. When a particular text is being read from the perspective of both the colonizer and the colonized, okay? You are reading a particular work by the perspective of both the colonizer who was being like colonized, who was being colonized, and the colonizer who was colonizing people. Okay, from both the perspective, if you'll read the text, that is actually contrapunctual reading. Okay, so now here you need to tell the examiner that who was the person developed it. Okay, so you need to answer that. Options are Louis Althusser, Edward W. Said, I.A. Richards, or Cleaneth Brooke. So the only option we have is Edward Said. Edward W. Said is the correct answer. Okay, so do remember that. Moving on to question number 23. Who among the following is not a prose writer? So with this kind of question, you need to be more aware of the writer's genre. Okay, so Roy Campbell, of course, he is a South African poet. He was a poet and literary critic. Okay, so there is no prose work here. A. Chopard was English poetry. Sorry, English poetry he used to write, and short stories he used to write. Okay, short stories. Then Lord Dunsany, Anglo-Irish writer. He was Anglo-Irish writer and dramatist. Of course, there is a prose work. There is a prose work. Then Somerset Maugham, who used to write short stories, of course, and novels and plays. So the only option we think is very much associated with the question, that is Roy Campbell. So we'll go with the first one. Okay, moving on to question number 24. Thomas Hardy's Dynast is a or an. Okay, so you need to answer whether it was a play, novel, epic poem, collection of lyrics. What was that? It was basically a closet drama. So I hope you understand what is closet drama. Closet drama in verse. Okay, so here you can see that the only option we can go with, the first one, a play. Okay, moving on to question number 25. The concept of deep structure and surface structure was given by. The concept of deep structure and surface structure was given by, whether it was Wolff or Sapient or Halliday or Chomsky. So when you see this deep structure or surface structure, you need to go with Chomsky. So the correct answer is Chomsky, Noam Chomsky. Okay, moving on to question number 26. Okay, so question number 26. Identify the figure of speech in the following lines. An 100 years should go to praise, and 100 years should go to praise. Thine eyes and on thy forehead gaze, 200s to adore its breast, but 30,000 for the rest. Okay, the person could have said in a very simple way, but the person said it in a more elaborated way, more beautifully he said it. Okay, here you cannot see irony, metonymy is not there, oxymoron is not there because there is no contradictory words or phrases is being used here. Okay, so the only figure of speech you can see here is hyperbole. Hyperbole basically stands for a way of speaking or writing that makes something sound better. Okay, by using hyperbole you are actually making it more sound like, okay, or more better. Okay, so the correct answer would be hyperbole. Moving on to question number 27. Dawn Cemetery is the title of DJ Enright's article on the poetry of. Okay, so on which poet, like on whom's poetry it was written, or the title has been taken from. Okay, you need to answer that. Well, whether it was William Epson. So basically now the title was taken from the Whitsun Wedding. Let me tell you the work first. Whitsun Wedding. And of course, you all know that Whitsun Wedding, who wrote it? Of course, Philip Larkin. So we'll go with Philip Larkin. The second one is the correct answer. Moving on to question number 28. Identify the autobiographical novel written by George Eliot. Identify the autobiographical novel written by George Eliot. Now you just need to go through each work and write it down, the genre, write it down themes of these works, so that you can answer such kind of questions. So whether it was The Meal on the Floors or Adam Bede or Delian Deronda or Middlemarch. So from here you can see that George Eliot wrote these works, The Meal on the Floors, Adam B. Do remember these things. Delin Durenda, Middlewards. Even you can consider, you can cover a lot of things from the previous year questions, okay. So the correct answer is The Meal on the Floors. This is the autobiographical novel here. Moving on to question number 29. Sancho Panza. Have you heard about it? Sancho Panza is a fictional character from, basically he was a squire, okay, squire of Don Quixote. So in the play, of course, in the work, basically I'll say it. Okay, whether it's Don Quixote or Waiting for Godot or Caligula or Iliad. Of course, I already told you about Don Quixote here. So the first one is the correct option. Right? Moving on to question number 30. And the last one. Which of the following American play had 742 performances and has been revived on Broadway 4 times? Okay. And one more thing. It was actually won Tony Awards. 3 Tony Awards basically it won. Okay, for best revival. For best what? For best revival. Right? Which is the work? Which one is the work? All My Sons, The Glass Manegrave, C. Death of a Salesman, or A 200th Story. The correct option is Death of a Salesman, and it was published in 1949. Do remember the publishing year here. Now, we have completed today's lecture. Thank you so much and all the very best. If you have any suggestion, you can always comment and tell me. Okay, thank you.